I'm Michael Jacobsen. I'm a serial entrepreneur and high-performance business coach. Welcome to the Inspiring Leadership Series and our host, Jonathan Bowman-Perks.
Thank you very much indeed, Michael. And what a life and what a career you've had thus far, with so much more to do. And I just love the fact that a whole variety of countries, companies, you've been an entrepreneur, you've been there, you've done it yourself with different businesses, particularly arenas, convention centers, theaters, live entertainment. You put Dirty Dancing on a theater stage show. You've done a hell of a lot. And luckily you're out of that at the moment in the middle of a pandemic. So good choice by you. But Michael, tell us a bit about what you're doing right now and also your journey and your life story, really, in a bit of a nutshell of the learnings that we can take from it.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me, Jonathan. It's really it's an interesting time in the world, and yes, I am very grateful that I'm not in live entertainment, and my heart absolutely goes out to everybody that's in that, because it's such a difficult time right now for this is perhaps one of the worst hit sectors. But personally, yes, I'm grateful. But I had a great period of time building up businesses in live entertainment and in property entertainment, which is a specialist property business where we owned theaters and I was entertainment arenas, convention centers, exhibition centers. This was mainly a business in Australia, in the Asia Pacific region, although we did have some in the US as well. But along the way, we, through connections and as life and as business happens, we were invited to bid for the rights for Dirty Dancing, and one way or another, maybe it was Australian charm or craziness, I'm not sure, and hopefully a little bit of skill, we were awarded the rights from Lionsgate Films, which is the film company that owned the brand. And we then were the proud owner of a piece of paper, which was the IP to the script, or the script itself, and the IP to the name. So that then also commenced a major journey from around 2003 onwards, right into the 2010s, when I eventually exited that business. So yes, live entertainment and entertainment and leisure with a little bit of mix of property was really where I built up my entrepreneurial life. And along the way, I've really, and continuing exponentially more and more so, I've always had a passion for working with other people, be they entrepreneurs, business owners, whoever they might be. In fact, probably from the time I was a child, I was, giving people advice. I was clearly unqualified at that point to give advice to anybody, hopefully now a little bit more qualified. But I always just wanted to, I suppose, at the risk of sounding cliche, I've always wanted to try and bring out the best in people. And I find that now, I have particular skill sets and particular track records in certain areas, but business and leadership being those areas, I can really apply that to people. So I've written a couple of books and hosted a TV show in Australia, and now.
Well, just tell us what your books are called for people who are listening.
Business of Creativity, which was a business book published in the UK, where I live now, for creatives, and then my other book, which has a very long title, chosen by the publisher. I still love them, but it was called Entrepreneurs, Mavericks, and Empire Builders.
Oh, that's good.
By published in Australia. And that was really where I went around and interviewed around 20, 25 very high achievers in entrepreneurialism, in venture capital, in creativity, mainly in the UK and also in Australia, but it was an Australian kind of focus book. They were more well known there, and that was published in 2019, and then I hosted a show on Sky News in Australia as well, which was called Nothing Ventured, which was similar, interviewing entrepreneurs and business people. And now, as I have, really on or off, but now I'm completely focused on it. I work as a business coach with a bunch of ambitious entrepreneurs right across the world. And I've got a couple of programs in development, but I got to say, I actually have a passion for working one-on-one with people. And, I work with people in Australia, the USA, South Africa, UK, Europe. And I really find this is it's fantastic. I actually feel privileged to actually get paid to do it, because I eventually get so inspired working with these people as well. But that's why I'm now focused on.
Good. And take us right back to childhood. How did this entrepreneur, coach, business speaker How did you begin out, and who was your, I mean, you were giving advice when you were younger, but who in your relations or your teachers were quite role modeling or were quite defining moments in your upbringing?
Yes, well, my dad he's still alive, but he is no longer working actively, but he was a concert promoter. And concert promoters, you know, AKA gamblers, are perhaps the textbook entrepreneur. In fact, they're right on the very end of the spectrum between entrepreneur and gambler, I would say. But nevertheless, he was a concert promoter, and he was Australia's leading concert promoter right at the time I was growing up. And it always helped for my popularity in school, because I was always able to give out free tickets to people. Although, funnily enough, the people I gave free tickets to never call me anymore, but that's another matter. He was a textbook entrepreneur, so I was able really by osmosis to model entrepreneurialism, I guess, just, you know, but as they say, around the dinner table. That was all I knew. All I knew was, you know, somebody doing deals, flying all around the world, getting calls at all hours of the night, putting things together. And that was what I modeled, what I observed. You know, and I had this, as we all do with our own parents and our kids do with us. You have the ability to see what's working and what doesn't work, and you know, what's stressful and what's not stressful. And you know, concert promoting to me is extremely stressful. So I sort of thought, how can I apply entrepreneurialism and what I perceived as the enjoyment of entertainment business, but in a safer way. So that's what I aspired to do. But then on the other person, when I was in year 11 at school in Australia, which is around, I guess, 17, I think, or, yeah, 16, 17, I had a school teacher who was actually a multi-millionaire, and he taught. He enjoyed. He was very wealthy, and he enjoyed teaching. I believe he'd inherited some money or some such thing, but then he'd spent the majority of his life, I guess he was in his 50s, and investing in the stock market and trading on the stock market and doing these kind of things. So, and he enjoyed working as a teacher, but he taught business studies, and, you know, it was really a paid hobby. And so he taught me, we got talking, obviously, in the course of class, and at that stage, you're kind of old enough to communicate properly with your teachers as adults. And, you know, he started to teach me about the stock market. And in those days, wasn't that long ago, I think it was around 1994 or 5 maybe. But of course, it was still a little bit before Google. He recommended me some books on the stock market, which I went away and read. And, you know, then I started to trade the stock market or invest in the stock market, which then I used to pay myself through university. But nevertheless, he was you know, and continues to be, but he was an inspiration for me, and clearly one of those key figures that you meet across the path of your life, which then propelled me forward and propelled my passion for business.
Fantastic. And so from that upbringing, and entrepreneurship was in the blood, not only dad, but the millionaire business studies teacher. That's the best ever. I love that one. My daughter's been a teacher teaching English, and she's now going into digital technology, into digital consultancy, doing learning and development, and their onboarding. That excites her. Yes. But take you back to when you were, say, 18. What bit of advice would you give yourself, knowing all that you know now, to the 18-year-old Michael?
The advice that I would give is that you really need to focus on your purpose in life. Now, everybody talks about this. I know you can see anybody from Oprah Winfrey down talking about purpose, but it is critical, and it's something that I think is really missed at school. It's missed, not deliberately or not, because we've got to all pay mortgages and buy cars and live and do things, and you know, what your real purpose is almost seems like it's a luxury if you can work that out. And, you know, getting paid to do what your purpose is, you know, something that only Hollywood actors can do, and not for the rest of us. But nevertheless, you know, a lot of people don't necessarily have the contextual information. And I didn't either, I don't think, you know, but nobody does. I know the question was about me, but to understand what's your purpose. And so, you know, I commenced working in the bank, in the stock market, which I actually loved, because I loved I love the cut and thrust, the entrepreneurialness of that. That wasn't my purpose, but and of course you don't always necessarily expect yourself to do what you want to do immediately, although some people seem to find that route. But I think the advice is that you do have to find your purpose as soon as possible, and your purpose really is what brings you joy. Now then the next question is, can you make a living out of that or not? Now, I'm realistic to say that clearly a lot of people's purposes, you possibly can't, and that's okay. At least work out what it is, and it's something that brings you joy and fulfillment. And this is something which, by the time you get older, you're going to wish that you started a whole lot earlier. So, to me, that's the most important advice at that age of 18.
Yeah, and that's great. And then also think about the whole of your life. There's a lovely book called Life is in the Transitions, and we have highs, we have lows.
Yes.
What would be a moment of pure joy, real pride and joy, and what would be both a business and a personal dark moment? But I'm sure all three have given you lessons that you've taken with you in your advice as a coach.
So far as I got to say that when we in terms of a business high, I recall every single opening night of Dirty Dancing as if it was yesterday, and particularly when we bought Dirty Dancing as a little old Australian company. I'll never forget the opening night back in, I think it was 2005, maybe 2006, I believe, on the West End, excuse me, in London, of course. And to sit there, in the audience of your own show, which was a hit show, it had sold out, and had a lot of box office records, which had broken by the time it opened. And to sit there in London, at the West End, the home of the theatre business, and a place which is basically impossible for foreign producers to break into or to even get a theatre to put your show in. To sit there the opening night was not just for business, more for personal reasons, but it was a big paradigm, was extremely emotional. And, just one of those times where you can replay it in your mind as if it was, as if your mind recorded every aspect of that night. So that's something which I'm very, very proud about. In terms of negative or darker situations, I've obviously done many transactions like most entrepreneurial people, and they don't always work out. But I've had a very negative one, which I believed erroneously therein lies the message would be a very simplistic one. And I had a friend who was the lawyer. He was like he's like a GP general lawyer who did bits and pieces. He was close to retirement. I thought, what, I don't need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on this transaction. It's done. It's easy. It's fine. So I got this guy. He charged $20,000 or something, which was very, very tiny in the context of the deal. And I think you just need to look over it. Everything's fine. It turned out it wasn't fine, and I did get cheated by the people on the other side, but the lawyer should have picked that up. But I should have hired a better lawyer. I should have focused on it and treated it as more important and been more, not suspicious by any means, but just been more careful with it. And it lost probably lost me over the years between 50 to probably 75, 100 million Aussie dollars. So it was a very painful lesson, but I came to peace with it, and I mean that sincerely, because you do have to. Well, you don't have to, because many people don't, but I did look back and try and learn my lesson, and I realized there's just no point blaming everybody else, because ultimately I have to take responsibility. Nor do I blame myself, but I took responsibility, and then I just moved on. Yeah. And that was it. But yeah, it was a very dark moment personally and professionally at that time, and so it wasn't a happy period.
Yeah. And what about personal life? Any highs and lows with family and friends and things that would hit you hard?
Well, look, I think when you're in entrepreneurialism, you do have difficult times. There's no doubt about it. And I find the way I'll answer that question is this: when you have a family life or a personal life or a partner or even friends, it's when you're in the day-to-day of entrepreneurialism, you'll go home to dinner at the table, or you'll be with kids, or you'll be with friends, or you'll be in a picnic on the weekend, or whatever it might be. And you can't switch your mind off. I don't mean that with any disrespect to anyone that works for other companies, because I know that people, the employees and team members work hard as well. But you literally can't it's very hard to give yourself permission to shut off. And also, you may literally not be able to shut off, if you're in the middle of doing a deal or something at that time, or if you're stressed about something, it's pretty hard to just, overcome it. So it does affect your relations with people, and people can see it. You think you're hiding it and you think you're all jolly, and people can see it on your face. And I remember a friend of mine who was a doctor at he's a friend of my kids friends, actually, that's why I say ours, but he was a doctor in the UK. At one occasion, a barbecue, he called me over. He said, "Look, is everything okay?" And I thought, "Everything's fine. I'm happy. I'm laughing." This was a number of years ago. He said, "Oh, it looks like something's not quite right, or you're not quite present in the moment." And I had just brushed it off and said everything's fine, and typical man, everything's great. And I went home and thought about it, and he was right, of course, because I did have something on my mind. And it was interesting because clearly doctors are trained to look at you and look through you and to look at what you're not looking for. And I realized, I don't really want to be carrying that energy around at all times. And that was actually the important moment. I realized that I want to start to move into other areas, not just this continual buying and selling, which I then want to also use my positive experiences and negative experiences to help other people in entrepreneurialism, because having been there myself, having been distracted at the dinner parties and the barbecues and everything else, as I just explained, I want to do what I can do to prevent other people from having to do that. Not as some kind of hero, but because if they're not like that, they'll be able to fulfill their purpose a whole lot better, contribute to society a whole lot better.
Brilliant. And sorry that you had to go through that, but I think it then makes you more human and more humility for yourself, like the doctor. I imagine your skill, Michael, I've sensed it in our conversation at the very beginning. You're very intuitive and you sort of pick things up, and and we have to learn the skills now of doing this over a medium where we're watching just this.
Yep.
And someone might say to you, and I go, "Michael, how are you?" And you go, I'm fine. And I go, I'm not getting that. It's not landing with me. What's really going on? What's really, really going on? Well, funny you mention it, and out it comes. Okay, let's go around the Inspiring Leadership Compass, just to sort of quick fire your kind of views and perhaps some tips. Starting with MQ, the true north, the values, fundamental values that you grew up with and believed in, and how you perhaps brought those into your businesses, or maybe been in a business which didn't have your values and where there was a clash. And what do you do when your values and you drift apart, like magnetic north does move? True north is always true north. What have you done, and what tip would you give people who are listening?
Absolutely. Well, look, I think that your values are really, of course, ideally they're going to be instilled in you in childhood, and not through negative experiences. But that is your compass, and that should be your compass, of course, in relationships and in business as well, which is also relationships. And the fact is that people don't set about, I don't believe people set about to dislike you. People don't set about to break up or get divorced or dislike each other or have litigation with their business partners either. That happens clearly when there's misunderstandings and when there's breakdowns in communications, or when there's issues around people's value systems. And so I believe that when you're in business with somebody, be they an investor, a partner, whoever they are, yes, of course you got to have integrity, but to me, I behave I aspire to behave towards them with the respect that honors their faith in me or their investment in me, and their investment in me may be financial, maybe time, and maybe a life partner giving you their life, whatever it is. Somebody's invested something in you, and that is, I believe, that bond must be honored. And of course there's ups and downs, and not everything works out in business perfectly, and there may be things that upset people from time to time, but if you try and honor that at all times, I think, you know, you're on the right track, and that's what I believe that I do, and I try to do. And if something doesn't work out this year, well, it doesn't mean that, you know, it's not going to work out next year, or it doesn't mean that, you know, I've forgotten about you, or that, you know, so I always try and if things work out immediately, things work out later, it doesn't really matter to me. Once they're engaged with me in one way or another, you know, I've got a very strong sense of loyalty, and, you know, I'll do every single thing I can to honor that relationship, you know, as long as I've got breath to do so. And that's how I try and operate in business. I believe that I operate that way.
Really good. And you've made me think that often people don't get to know the people they work with. And one of the things that I learned recently, I knew it from before, but I'm finding it's making such a difference, is I ask people for their life story. Yes. And maybe give them an hour to tell me the whole life story and the kind of person they are today and the values they were brought up on. And when you understand the journey someone's on and what they talk about and what they highlight, I found that's really helpful to understand their intent, because we judge them by their actions and never their intentions. We judge ourselves, yes, being hypocrites that we are, by our intentions and never our actions.
Yes, yes.
So I'm sure you do that, but I do find hearing people's life stories incredibly useful. Taking on to a point you were making earlier about focusing on your purpose, PQ is the next thing. And Lee and I would agree with you that what gives your life meaning and purpose, or dharma, or I have a calling, which is doing this, and a vocation. So yes, it's I don't get paid for this. I just really believe in it, paying it forward. And you'll recommend a CEO to me, and he'll come on, and then he'll recommend someone else. What gives your life meaning and purpose? Why do you do what you do now?
Look, I think it's a great point, and I believe that also, if you, not that you should, but if you would, or not that you should always, but if you would do what you do for nothing, then that's how you really know that you love what you do. Excuse me. If somebody pays you to do it, that's all the better. But your purpose can show up across a spectrum, and sometimes it could be doing something for nothing. Sometimes it could be getting paid. Sometimes it could be whatever, doing it for a friend or a family member. But whatever your core gift or your core skill set is, or your purpose, that can show up across in different areas of your life, and that's okay. In fact, that's how it should be, because I believe you're supposed to be doing what you're supposed to be doing across the board, not just when you close the office door or whatever. So to me, working, educating people, inspiring people, motivating people, getting people to see things from a completely different angle, and then activating something within them, both using hard skills and soft skills. So, experience, things that you can see, and, I can show you, and, kind of, I suppose, God-given or natural things, which I've been given, which every single person on the planet's been given, all different. Using those things then to help people to do what they do better. That's what I do. And that's whether it's, it doesn't matter to me whether that's through a book, through a television show, through talking to somebody at, a friend over a coffee, or whether I'm coaching. It's essentially the same activity.
Yeah, beautifully put. And then taking us on to another aspect we talked about before, the importance, particularly, it's been highlighted in the pandemic, mental health, physical health, well-being. And many leadership models don't talk about this enough. They think, oh, we've forgotten something. Oh yeah, people's health, we've run them into the ground and they're all getting ill and they're going off sick. Why is that? So what's your approach to your mental and physical health and well-being? There was the doctor spotting that something wasn't right in you, but you look in good health at the moment. Tell us, what do you do to keep in good health mentally and physically? And when you've fallen off the wagon, whether it's alcoholic or anything, what do you do to get back on again?
I absolutely. Look, I think that really, if you're not feeling good on any given day, you're certainly not going to be giving your best to your work, to your life, to your loved ones, or to yourself. That's a fact. And I think, a lot of the time where I go through the day and, your state starts to drop, or you just realize you've gone from 10 to, whatever, 6. Oftentimes it's when you're not feeling great. It could be you didn't sleep that well the night before. It could be, your shoulders are a bit stiff or something. It could, anything like, and sometimes you don't even know consciously what it is, but you drop below where you want it to be, or where you're used to being. And then it shows up in your demeanor immediately. I find that it does. And then, but it's really easy to stay there as well. The key is to mentally pull yourself back up, but it's hard if you don't feel that great. So I personally, in a very detailed answer to that question, I go to all sorts of, complementary healthcare people, and take supplements, and, meditate, and also really try and focus on what my state is at any given time as well, and how that works in circumstances that you're in. So I really believe that your emotional health, your physical health, your spiritual health, and just your day-to-day operating behavior, they're all connected and interlinked. So to me, it's an ongoing journey, an ongoing activity to try and be at the peak as best as possible at all times. And I think if you try, then if you set your subconscious mind to tell you if you drop, or if your state drops, and then you can work out why, then that's the key to know. And then you can check in, what is it? Am I hungry? Am I tired? Am I stiff shoulder? Or whatever it is, or just not enjoying this conversation, or whatever it is, then you can adjust that. So you really, I find it's very important to have all those areas.
I couldn't agree more. And as I've had to handle some difficult moments in my business life and my personal life, I found that whether it be getting therapy at the time, or whether it be eating well, sleeping, midday, power naps, supplements, as you say, I do a lot of mindfulness, journaling, 5minutejournal.com, I find very good. They really do help for us as what I would describe as we're business athletes.
Yes.
And we've got to look upon it as that. And too many times I come across CEOs or managing directors, partners in professional services firms working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365, and they can't understand why suddenly down they go. And I go, you've been setting yourself up for failure for months, if not years. And you've got this huge paunch of food and beer and stress that you're carrying around. You've got to do something. And I've seen some major changes in people. Yeah. One in particular I met on a train 5 years ago, and we've just finished working together. Wow. And he said, completely transformed, because he's got a personal trainer, there's mindfulness, he's really eating healthily, he's cut out the booze. And of course, he said what's helped in the pandemic, he hasn't been doing crazy traveling where he's been getting home at 4 a.m. and then leaving at 3 a.m.
Eating garbage foods in hotels and so on. Yes.
Correct.
No,
So there is.
I agree with you. It's so it's so important, and as whatever's going on within you will soon show up outside. And so if you don't fix it, be it bad food, bad thoughts, bad whatever, or less than optimal, shall we say, it's going to show up in your life. That's just the way the world is, not a doubt. So and then you got the double whammy that you feel not so great, and then you've created a world around you that's not so great.
Yeah, and someone said to me, you're never not communicating, and your body communicates. You see it in your skin and that kind of stuff. The next area that talking about from people and travel, particularly with someone like yourself who's worked in Slovak Republic, Czech Republic, Romania, Poland, UK, Australia, all around,
yes,
is cultural intelligence quotient. And it's a new area we're looking into around diversity, equality, inclusion, which has been around for a while. But how have you helped people adapt to different cultures? So this is beyond emotional intelligence. This is like a environmental intelligence. And what lessons would you give to people about improving their cultural intelligence, CQ?
Look, I think especially in terms of diversity and inclusion and just in general, I take a really simplistic view. if firstly, I was brought up by my parents and my dad in particular was very big on this and continues to be. You treat everybody exactly equally because they are equal. And my dad, honestly, whether he was talking to the Queen or anybody else in any other socioeconomic group, it's quite. In fact, I've never really seen it with anybody else that I've ever met apart from him. He doesn't see any, and rightly so. He sees no difference. He chats, and he's been with. I don't know if he's been with the Queen, but he's been with, pretty high governor generals and high people, but he doesn't talk to them any differently to the way he talks to anybody else in any other aspect of his life. And this, he sees them as people, and that was a lesson which I absorbed as you absorb as a child. And I believe that this is the only way that, I can't imagine why you would be any different. And I know that sounds very simplistic because obviously the world is riddled with people who disagree by the very nature of that comment. But really, I think firstly, so that's firstly, everybody's equal. And also, when you talk to somebody long enough, it doesn't matter who they are, they're human and they're going to have hopes, dreams, passions, loves, stories. And, this is fascinating when you stop seeing what they do or who they are or whatever, or it doesn't matter, they all have the same pain points. A Hollywood actor is going to, you're not going to really have to talk to them for that long. If they opened up to you, you find what their problems are. And then suddenly, they're no different to anybody else, which of course they're not. And somebody at a, quote unquote, lower socioeconomic status, they're also going to have hopes and dreams which deserve to be honored and brought out. So, that's how I see things. In terms of cultures abroad, I also believe I'm very inquisitive, very curious, and, I am fascinated and love to absorb cultures everywhere that I go. And I find that, I've spent a huge amount of time, continue to spend a huge amount of time in Slovakia, Czech Republic, Central and Eastern Europe. And of course, I've traveled extensively around the world. As you can imagine, coming from Australia, we have to travel everywhere. People would ever come down to us for a meeting. But, I think that if you're interested or trying to educate yourself in a place where you are doing business, or the hotel room where you find yourself, instead of just sitting watching TV or something like that, if you get out and you try and look at things, just go for a walk and absorb the atmosphere, then you're absorbing the culture, and then you're honoring that and you're understanding it to a degree, and then you can take that with you everywhere and understand it.
Yeah, and I just so agree with that, and want to honor my brother, Dr. Graham Perks, for role modeling what you've just been talking about. Sadly, back in January, a psychopath attacked him, broke into his house, tried to kill him, and tried to burn his house down with his family in. But it was in the news. It's another story, and it's shocking, and I'm still coming to terms with it. He lived, but he only just lived, and it'll take 2 years for him to recover. And you just think, a man like that, who would welcome people from Syria, from Afghanistan, whatever, because he was a surgeon. And so if there were people visiting, he'd invite them to come and stay, just like my mother used to do on the way back from church. There'd be a little old lady with sprouty moles, and she stank of urine, but she'd go, "Where are you having lunch?" And she'd go, "I haven't got lunch." She said, "You have now, get in." And we'd all move over and she'd sit with us and have lunch. So Graham took that attitude of people, whatever their background, he'd make them feel welcome, and he'd try and learn something about them. Yes. And I think it's a really important area: diversity, equality, and inclusion. And it's lovely to hear that. Let's move on from the environment down to a personal thing: emotional and social intelligence. Your ability to read yourself, read others, read the environment, which melds into the CQ bears. But you've got some great skills in listening, rapport building. You have to read your clients as a coach to these other entrepreneurs. How did you learn it most recently? You're a lifelong learner, I'm sure. Where have you been picking things up about those skills?
I think to some degree, I guess some things come naturally, and I think if it's in line with your calling and your life is to work with people and communicate with them and help them, you're probably going to be have some of those skills already. But I do work on refining that, and I believe that you really have to tune into people, and you have to tune into the other person. You can't just bowl along and just be you. That's fine if you're on your own, but if you're talking to somebody, you're doing business with somebody, you're in a relationship with somebody, you must tune into them. And you not only subconsciously, like people that have been in a relationship for 50 years, no, consciously tune into them. And when you do that, then you really see a whole different side of a person, and then you can really have a greater understanding of them, a greater empathy, and a greater ability to communicate directly to them and with them at a very deep level. So yes, I've done a whole lot of studying this area and courses and reading and really trying to enhance my understanding of it. But I think at a simplistic form, that's it, because all too often people will just go up, they'll put a natural barrier and just be them. And that's fine if you're just, racing around in the middle of the day and you don't have the energy to engage. Okay. But if you want to have meaningful conversations and meaningful interactions, you must tune into the person.
Yeah, so true. And as an entrepreneur who travels the world and has bought and sold businesses, been successful, been stung with that contract that you talked about as one example, I'm sure there's many others. How have you coped with RQ, resilience quotient, coping with adversity, setbacks, disappointments? I'm a great believer in the Stoic philosophy of Marcus Aurelius Seneca, Epictetus, and controlling the controllables and let go of the other things. Be aware of them, but don't be a non-attachment, non-judgment. What about you? What's your way of handling resilience and coping with adversity?
Look, I think when you get into difficulty, obviously, by all means, we should absolutely, or especially in business and in life, try and plan away from any problems. That's a fact. It's not a badge of honor to get into problems or to be stung or to have issues. But from time to time, we all have them. But try and plan away from them. But the fact of the matter is, we're here. We're pretty familiar enough with what life's all about by now, and we know that. There's issues, and it's mountains and valleys, and that's how it is. But the fact is that I think that it really comes down to drawing within yourself when you're in a difficult situation. You really have to develop. You must, especially in business, you must develop an internal strength, and or go inside yourself and you realize that you do have an internal strength. Now, going through a difficult situation may make you turn around and say, well, you know what, I don't like being in business anymore. I don't like this, it's too much. And if that's the case, don't do it, leave. You shouldn't do something that you don't want to do, but you can't deal with that when you're in the middle of a problem. That's for later, as is getting angry with the fact that you're in the problem. When you're in the problem, you must deal with the problem. The only way to do that is to rise up, to draw within yourself, and to focus on getting out of the problem. So many times people focus on I should do this next time, or I didn't do this, and that just keeps you in a circle. So that's what I've tried to do or have done in the past. And then you going inside and then you're finding that strength, you're finding answers, you're finding inspiration again, just to keep going. It can be difficult, and you got to find things that you enjoy to keep you happy along the way. Could be just going out coffee and going for a walk, but just the small things are going to keep you going through those little bad patches.
Such sound wisdom. I really agree with that, Michael. And again, the Stoics talk about an inner citadel that we have within us, that the walls should never get breached. And Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, talked about that they can do things to your body, but your choice and your mind and how a situation is neither good or bad, but how you think about it is. And you have choice between stimulus and response. And I think we often give that choice away to others. I had to because they did this to me. No, you chose to. You chose to. So I think that's very important. Now,
people think about it. It's great to read books as well, but then oftentimes when people are in the circumstances, all the knowledge goes out the window and they just react, or we all do, we're human. But the key is to read these books and Viktor Frankl's learnings and everything, especially, and then apply, have it
practice
ready,
it,
apply it. That's the key.
Yeah, and that I think is what I like so much about Stoical philosophy. It's not just about knowing the philosophy; it's about living it, and actually preparing for death, because it's the one thing that we can be certain of. We're all going to die.
And none of us are getting out of here alive.
No, it's like, it's only ending one way. And in my brother's case at 65, suddenly he almost died, and it was such a shock to us. But he lived. My father was killed when he was just 35, fast jet pilot in the Navy, and he died saving 2 other people. They lived, he died. That was a calling he made as a leader, which is why I do this work with you and others, because I was an instructor at Sandhurst and I was average, and I thought I was something special. And they told me, no, you're average, and there's others who are better than you. And I thought, I need to learn from someone. So I went back to learn from the people who'd served with my father. And that's why Inspiring Leadership has sprung up. But your brand, your reputation, your image, your impact, Michael. Here you are as a coach, you do 360 with your clients and things like that. But as you were growing up, how did you get 360 feedback? Because entrepreneurs often can live in an echo chamber or be alone and go, this is a good idea. And everybody goes, yeah, it's a good idea, boss. And off they go. But they don't get independent advice like from people like you and myself much. What have you done to learn from feedback over the years?
Look, I believe that you must solicit feedback from people, and you have to do it. And when you are an entrepreneur, or when you're when you're running your own race as opposed to working at a big company, you're not offered, no one comes along and says it's HR 6 months review time. You have to do it all the time, and in fact you need to do it all the time because things are moving dynamically at all times. And so I to answer your question, I openly encourage and ask people, friends and close friends, family, my partner, encourage people to tell me. I don't want you to just get cranky or say, Michael's in a bad mood today. Tell me what I'm doing right. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. If you can spare the time, I'd much rather you do that than think something or whatever. And also, I actually need the feedback, please, because then if it resonates with me and it's coming from the right place, which obviously, if it's from your friends or close family, then of course, you would expect that it would, then do something, change it, act on it, and then evolve out of that paradigm, be it a short-term one or a long-term one, and move on, get over it, get through it.
Brilliant. No, that's really good. And then on to legacy from brand, your personal brand reputation, to LQ, leaving things better than you found them. And you're in the business of stewardship. We don't own things. We don't even own our children. No. We're just trying to help them on their way as they pass through our lives. But what's been your view on legacy, and what do you think, what kind of legacy would you like to hope that people will say about you when your time has come and you turn to dust like Alexander the Great and his mule driver, who are both buried next to each other in the same dust, even though one thought himself very important and ruler of the world?
100%. That's such an important comment. I think that what I would like is twofold. Firstly, I would love if people that had known me or that had worked with me or that I'd touched through the course of my life had been positively impacted or felt that they were positively impacted or in fact were in some way, be it through business or just through life engagement. And so that's the first thing. The second thing, and I hope that the vast majority of people would put themselves in that category, that'd be a good legacy. And secondly, even though it's perhaps too late for those of us in that position at that point, I would like to have been fulfilled and to have fulfilled my own purpose on earth. And I think if you fulfill your own purpose, you feel fulfilled, and other people being positively impacted by you as a person, as a soul, and or in business or any other way, then to me that would be that would be a life that was lived well.
That's really good. And you've just made me think, with all the experiences you have, and you're advising these different government agencies in a variety of countries, you're reading widely, you're meeting different entrepreneurial leaders, you've been there yourself, you've seen industries and sectors that have had highs and now are having difficult times. Take a bit of time, if you would now, just 2 or 3 minutes, just give me your reading of where the world is right now. Where do you think it's going? Where's business going? Which are going to be the sectors that are going to do well? Who are the ones that are going to have a tough time? You know, where are you advising people to start putting their energy?
I believe that the world is now, in fact, for 20 years we've been in a change. If you really look back, in my opinion, from when we moved out of the 90s, there was a massive energetic shift which showed up initially as the tech wreck in the early 2000s, and then obviously with the onset and the propulsion of technology companies. But not only that, there was a big change in the way people thought about things, and there was a big change, if you will, in the vibe from what was generally, if you look against the prism of the last 20 years, generally a simpler time, in stereotypical terms in the world. So I think that things have been shifting. We've obviously seen the rise of terrorism in the last 20 years. Now we've seen a pandemic. So things are changing. Whether they're connected or not connected doesn't matter. Things are changing, and I think that people, what I believe is that people need to recognize that things are changing, and they need to accept that things are changing. Of course, me and we all hope, for example, that the pandemic will end and life will go completely back to normal. And maybe on the surface it will, and I hope that it does. But something will still have changed. Something will have shifted beneath the surface, and we need to be aware of that. And I think that looking forward in life or in business in particular, and in leadership in particular, you must be future ready. And we're in a time now, especially with technology being the accelerator beneath so many of the changes. We have to realize that the life as we know it, I mean, it's going to completely change in probably 5 years, let alone 20 or 30. So you have to lean into it. There's no point fighting it. There's no point wishing everything's going to be the same. Some things will stay the same, and we'll still have our families and loved ones and partners and so on. But, life around us will definitely change. And so I believe that people need to be aware of that, be broadly read about it, and not just one particular media organization or whatever. And you need to then take it inside yourself and try and think about it. None of us can predict exactly what it will be, but it'd be good, especially from a business or leadership standpoint, to be on the right side of it. And that starts from being aware of it and open to it and accepting of it.
Yeah. And whether it was a misquote or whatever, but the CEO of Goldman Sachs is sort of taken out of context, but saying that, this working from home is an aberration. We're going to go back to how we were. How do you think the offices and our ways of working with each other from a technical point of view, because your technology is something that you're very interested in, how do you think we will be working with each other in the next 2 or 3 years?
Well, I believe that things are driven, humans drive things. Bosses, I know Goldman's is a pretty, they're a pretty busy organization, but I think the human beings still work there, and they, across all organizations, it's human beings. So all of us have got used to, over a year. It only takes 12 weeks really to get into a new habit, and we've now had over a year of this new habit. That's taught all of us what's good and what's bad about it. That's for sure. Some people have struggled with homeschooling. Some people have had to work from their bedroom. Some people could be working from a 20-room mansion or house. So it's not been a democratic necessarily working from home, but nevertheless, it's given people the experience of what it's like, whether they're bored, whether they miss people, whether they are happy that they don't have to get on a commute particularly in the UK, so many people are so happy they have to even just get on the tube every morning and they can start their day in a more mindful manner, sitting having a coffee instead of, standing next to somebody's shoulder blade on the tube. So I think that, and these little things are what go through all of our minds. So if I was a betting person, I would say that things will revert, to maybe 60, 70% the same in general, but there's going to be something that sticks. And over the next 5 years, though, technology may well unstick that and take us back to working from home again, but with holograms or with VR or with the technology that we don't have now.
Yeah,
I think it would be a hard-pressed leader. You'd have to be a pretty hardcore leader to turn around in 6 months or so after everyone's vaccinated and say, hey, 100% of people have got to be here at 8 o'clock Monday morning. You got to stay till 6, and that's how I don't think people are going to buy it, and they'll lose if they still do it because they have to do it. They're going to not. Their heart won't be in it.
Yeah, no, well put. So last two areas, a book, and then you can give your introduction to yourself and give us a final top tip. So what would your book recommendation be, Michael?
One of my favorite authors and speakers is Dr. Joe Dispenza, who speaks, broadly on quantum physics, but also on human super performance and whatever that. I mean, that he brought.
What was his first name?
His name is Dr. Joe Dispenza. He's an American author and speaker, and he's got a book called Becoming Supernatural. And this book is all about high performance, but not just high performance, such as, get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and meditate, which is part of it, mind you. Although I haven't modeled that part yet. 6 o'clock's enough for me, but it's all about how do you fully, like what we were talking about earlier, how do you fully invoke mind, body, and spirit to become a powerful person, powerful for yourself, not power over other people. And he brings in quantum physics, he brings in all sorts of different universal concepts. Although it's not a by any means a sort of a esoteric spiritual book. It's a really meaty book and meaty concepts that you read it and it really transforms the way that you think about your own performance, which of course is at the end of the day what we talked about before, the thing you've got to constantly be tweaking.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. I will definitely get it, and hopefully there's an audio version for me to listen to, and I'll be listening to that in the next week. I'm listening to Malcolm X's autobiography at the moment, which was very interesting. I find that very powerful. So let's go into your top tip. Do your introduction. Give us your top tip, if you would.
I'm Michael Jacobsen. I'm a serial entrepreneur and business coach to high performers all around the world. My number one tip for productivity, for achievement, and for fulfillment is a concept called zero-based thinking. Now, zero-based thinking was originally generated by Dr. Brian Tracy, who is, of course, a best-selling author and one of the original pioneers of self-help, if you will. But what I love about zero-based thinking is that it merges past, present, and future. And it goes something like this. It's very simple, but it's unbelievably powerful. Knowing what I know now, would I still, and then you insert something from the past. So would I still hire Sally as head of marketing? Would I still marry John? Would I still merge my company? Would I still, in my case, would I still do a deal with a cheap lawyer? Would I still do whatever it might be? And then you insert it. Now, why it's powerful is this: because you're not attacking yourself for mistakes that you've made. You're not engaging in regret. You're soberly observing a result from the past, but you're also looking to the future and saying, well, what result could I possibly want? Because the result that I want in the future is an optimized result. I don't want anything other than 10 out of 10. And then you're then merging the present by saying, well, what would I do now? Knowing what I know now, not what you knew then, what you know now. And it gives you clarity within 1 second. You immediately know the answer, and then you take the action, and that creates a different future. And that all happens within, you can do it within probably 20 seconds all up. And it's an extremely powerful strategy. It's a life changer in business and in life. It removes emotion, it removes negativity, and it gives you a very, very clean, simple answer to your question. So this is, to me, the top tip that anybody can do, and you should do it on a weekly basis across your life. And you root out weeds. You can do different things. You can, it's not only negative. You might say, well, I know what I know now. That was the best decision of my life, getting engaged to this person or hiring this person. So, you know, if they're still in my life, I better appreciate them a lot more and do a lot more with them. So I can work that way as well. Really powerful tip.
Brilliant. Michael, Jacobsen, thank you very much indeed. Stay on, we'll have a bit of a chat. But I really appreciate your wisdom and your experience. And thank you. Keep motivating people around the world. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for having me on the show.